Hello, this is Darren Pulsipher, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, Optimizing Processes with Business Process Modeling, part 2 of my interview with Max Young, CEO of Capital BPM. Gotcha. So you know what this reminds me of? When I was in high school, I took drafting.
Yeah.
So I was in 3 years of drafting in high school, and my junior year they introduced CAD systems for the first time, computer-aided drafting systems, AutoCAD. And it was a huge shift from drawing out, because we had the big drafting boards, the whole thing. And you would have to draw pages and pages for complex systems, pages of diagrams so people could build them.
Yeah.
But you couldn't really test. How could you test that your model was right? You did a lot of work, and there was a lot of back and forth between the drafters, the architects, and the guys that had to build the things, right? All of a sudden, computer-aided drafting came along, and they really used a model. Instead, by using a model technique, now we could actually run simulations of those models and see if there were any issues. Like, hey, did I have electrical and plumbing going through the same holes in a wall? Well, that's a problem. You don't want electrical and plumbing together, right? And small things like that. So what you're saying with this is very analogous to a lot of architects are using PowerPoint presentations to architect or to show these business processes. But if you use a modeling tool, it ups the game. So it can find conflicts. It can find issues in what you captured or what you thought the business process was.
That's exactly right.
Is that
so
what I'm
you can
hearing?
actually see here, for example, that this thing has been deployed. You know, it's at this particular step. I can submit it. I can have logic in it that allows it to go one way or another. And what I like about this is that it solves a really important problem for me. And it's, again, a deeply pragmatic problem. You know as well as I do what happens when you want to start a new project. You sit down, you get, 10, 20 people into a room. You guys shoot the breeze for about 10 or 15 minutes about the kids and the snow. You talk about stuff. Somebody might draw on a whiteboard. Somebody takes notes, takes pictures. There's an analyst in the room. They go away, and if you're lucky, by the end of the week they've typed out the notes, they send it to everyone, and then after you're done with that, you find a time when everybody else can get in the room again. And again, if you're lucky, somewhere in the next 2 to 4 weeks you have like a second meeting about this, and you spend most of that meeting reviewing what you did previously, and then you might be able to move the ball forward an inch or two, right? I don't think I'm spelling any corporate secrets. That's a common secret.
No. This is corporate America.
But here's what I just did. I just went out and I built and I deployed this. I can put it into the hands of my business customers. They can actually come in here and they can say, well, I'm going to actually drive this task, right? I'm going to actually.
I want to step through it and see what it does,
when I
right?
push this? Well, now I come over here, and we see that the diagram is at this step. Like, it really went through these processes. Right. And if I had told it to do like a check for a RESTful call here or here, it would have done those things.
So that's kind of the third part here is I can take it from modeling to integration.
That's it.
So if I look at the steps here, we had articulate, right? Or capture the business process and articulate it, model it. And now I can choose integration points in these steps. I can say, hey, at this step, I'm attaching to a RESTful interface that's out there that gets that information for me and pumps it back in. So this is how I can integrate business process with microservices or services that are out there in the cloud, whatever the case may be.
Exactly so. So, for example, you could say, hey, if we're going to do this project, the orange spots are the places where we're going to need, someone to come in and create an API for us that we can invoke that checks for job history and checks for criminal review. And what are going to be the inputs and the outputs of this? Oh, well, the input's going to be the social security number and the date of birth and the state, and the output's going to be a Boolean. Did does the information match or does it not match? Right. So you can start having that iterative conversation, um, and that becomes
Yeah. So this, yeah, this sounds a lot like what we do in software development
it is.
today, right? Which has been kind of missing in the business process or systems
Hmm.
analyst space, where this is mostly sits, right? This mostly sits, oh, I've got a business analyst that's come in, help me do process improvement stuff, but they're not modeling. They're using Visio. Visio is not a modeler.
Right.
Visio is a drawing tool. So I really like this. And then you can drill down on, hey, here's some steps. You could deploy this as a
I
process today, no
I
problem,
just
right?
did, right? So this diagram, this is a deployed process.
Okay, so sweet. There's a lot of manual steps in this process.
Yep.
No big deal.
Yep. And that's why you actually
Now
see
I can
like
choose which ones to automate. I see what you're saying
right,
there.
and I can actually like do this really fast. Like let's say for the sake of argument, I want to put a decision on this interview step and go, hey, if the interview didn't go well, maybe we push back to HR and we say, or we push it back to the candidate and we say we have questions for you, right? So I can actually come in, I can evolve this. I can say, hey, this is going to be um, my default path over here. This is going to be, an expression, and that would be not what I wanted. Um, again, we got to put a logic in here, but we could be examining like a checkbox or whatever to indicate whether we want to move forward or not.
Right.
And then we
Right.
build this, we save it, we deploy it, and now the thing that's actually deployed is this newer process with the gateway here. And if I wanted to, I could go back and look at the previous version. So I've got two concurrent versions of the software working and deployed right now, right? I prototyped
That's bad and good at the
and
same
going at the
time.
same time, right? So you can actually see in here
Yeah.
like the data that's going through the system.
So all right. So I like where we're headed here. If we so we've got our three steps. What's the next step after I've integrated, right? Because you showed me some of the
Yeah,
stuff before. I can actually run. You guys have a tool, Lint, for business
we
process
do.
management,
So
which I
my
think is
without
wonderful.
being too braggy of our own stuff, we've actually built a couple of applications that make this a more um, easy thing to do. So what I was showing you was the native
Okay.
command modeler, but we've built our own system where you can kind of go in and go.
To help streamline, is it targeted primarily for business analysts
It is meant.
that are doing capture, or is it for the developer that's writing REST interfaces and things like that? What's the
So it's
target?
it's it supports different roles, right? So initially you would have a business analyst or an SME come in and sort of define out, well, here's the data model that we're working with. Here is the workflow that we have and the different rules that are involved. You can actually have them come in, as in this case, and go, well, here's a RESTful API that we're going to call. Let's say this gets a list of all the customers, and then we're going to have like a form, and the form is going to say display the customer or display all the different users, and we have like a WYSIWYG.
Okay, so you actually can take it to the next level, what I would call the next level below
Right.
just that model, where now you're actually creating the application
Yeah, that's right.
on top of that model, on top of that business process, so that I can watch it go through, I can drive it through, I can ask users for information, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
so for example, I could create a table and I could say this table, when it loads, it's going to make a RESTful call, and the RESTful call is going to be to say, I don't know, load all the customers, right? So
Right. So I want to kind of tease out a little bit on this is different than
oh yeah,
RPA,
yeah,
because RPA is I'm capturing what a user does with
right,
keystrokes, right? It's doing that. You guys are saying I have a business analyst that comes in, really looks at the process and the steps
that's right.
involved across multiple
In
departments.
my opinion,
And then,
RPA
yeah,
would be a step in here, right? So you might have
yeah, I can
like,
see that.
hey, when we review an application, and the first thing we do is we look at the boxes that come in from criminal background check and job history check. And if that's true, then, we pass it on to a senior HR person. Otherwise, we reject it, right? So at that point, I might plug in like an RPA step in here and go, this is just going to invoke RPA, right?
Gotcha.
So to me,
Okay. So that's the main
yeah,
difference. You're looking top down the whole
yeah, that's
process
exactly right.
across departments. And RPA is really how an individual might be doing a step in that process, or even a couple steps in that process, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely right. RPA, you can get a really fast win. Like, creating a true integration that talks to the back end, and you put the security certificates in place and all the right environments. That can take months, right? Just from the bureaucratic architecture. But you put an RPA bot in there that just opens the email, takes the two fields out, and puts them into this other system and pushes the button, and you've just immediately solved a problem in a couple of days or a couple of weeks that might have taken a really long time to do in a quote unquote correct way. And you always have the latitude to come in and change this and make it a true integration down the road.
Right. And I like that approach because there's always a point when you're designing a
Yeah.
system like this where you have to make a decision on how what is my return on the investment I'm going to spend right
Yeah.
now by automating something. And this, I love this because this gives you that opportunity to say, well, I'm going to automate this step. And that's it. Everything else is going to be manual, but this one step I'm going to automate, or this set of steps I'm going to
Yeah.
automate, and I'm in good shape. So I really like this iterative approach that we've been doing in software development
Yeah.
for some time. And it sounds like you're doing a great job at bringing the things that we learned in software development over the last 30 years into business process management and business process
So,
improvement.
I think I saw a little bit about some of the things that you had built, Darren, and I think you had sort of done the same sort of thing. Like, you have a system where you can visualize how things interact and actually drive that. And I think that's just what happens when you take smart people that have to solve big problems. We recognize the value of clarity.
Yeah, I like what you said there. The visualization is
Yeah.
key, right? Because that's how you're communicating what's going on.
Yeah.
And that gives you clarity. I really like how you brought that out. So that visualization really helps other people understand what's going
Yeah.
on.
You know, going back to like the martial arts metaphor, in some ways, I think of the injection of RPA as sort of fighting dirty. Like, you've got to do an integration. It's really hard.
Oh, all my RPA buddies out there, forgive
No, I
Max.
love it because it
No,
wins.
he.
It is
Yeah, it does win.
that's what
Yeah,
I
you're right.
mean.
That you get quick wins. Yeah, absolutely.
And that, I think that's the highest compliment. It's pragmatic. You can solve a problem today that if you took another path, you wouldn't be done talking about for 2 months.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
It is a, without putting too fine a point on it, it is a game changer. But it is, in my opinion, a tactical.
But it's a
Yeah,
short-term
but it's enough,
gain.
right?
Yeah.
You could, in a corporation the size of Intel or some of the ones that that we work with, short term gain like 3 months is millions of dollars.
but you don't want to rest your laurels on that short term gain.
Right,
That's
right.
the problem, right? Right. You need to see how that little process fits into this bigger process, and you need to look at your full business processes to find optimizations, to find steps that I can get rid of. I mean, we've had this. There's this old story. It's a funny story where this lady is teaching her
Hmm.
daughter how to cook a Thanksgiving
Yeah,
roast, and she goes and she cuts the roast in half and puts it in the pan and cooks it. And her daughter says, "Well, why do you cut the roast in half?" And she goes, "Well, because my mom taught me to cut the roast in half." So they asked grandma, right? "Hey, why are you cutting the roast? Why did you do that?" And she says, "Because the pan I used wasn't big enough." But this process of cutting the
yeah,
roast passed down from generation to generation. We have stuff like that in our companies all over the place. Why are you doing it that way? Well, because it's always been done that way, without anyone sitting and really analyzing why. What is the purpose of doing it? So we end up with process bloat all over the place,
yeah, yeah.
and bureaucracies that fit in.
And I think
So
that's where our training as engineers comes in, because we have to be clear eyed and look at, why are we doing it this way? What is the benefit? Does it have one that's a variable that I failed to capture in this equation, right? And
yeah,
testing, simulation, running things again and again. Like, one of the things that I love to do as a stress relieving mechanism is, once I deploy a process, I will pull it up and I'll start moving activities around. I'll do this thing before that thing, and I'll see if I can do parallel processing. I'm playing with it. I'm empirically testing it, and that adds a lot of value.
yeah. That does add a lot of value. Absolutely. And it's something that we need to be able to do more of. And that is, I don't know what you would call that, permutations,
Yeah,
test the model by pulling it apart a little bit, or the process by rearranging things.
I call it
Um,
experimentation.
and
Again,
I like,
yeah.
there you go. That's the word I was looking for. Experimentation. We did something like this. I was on a big project at a former company, Cadence
Hmm.
Design Systems, where we were doing running tests of our software every
Yeah,
night. And our software runs would take 24 hours to test our
yeah.
software. And we had to run it. This was back in the good old days where you had to run it on
Oh, yeah,
HPUX, AIX, Solaris, all the flavors of Linux. So we had these massive, massive grids of old compute
yeah,
resources that we ran these tests on. And we would run them. One test on HPUX would run front ways, and the other one on AIX would run back ways. So halfway through the night, we would know, like 12 hours in, we would know how the test generally did. Crazy that we did that. So we started looking at optimizing this. How could we make this faster? And we took this same approach. What if I
yeah,
pulled things apart a little bit, moved things around, group tests together? If they failed early and I didn't
yeah,
run
yeah.
more tests. We were able to get that cycle down to about
Oh,
4 hours.
nice.
So all of a sudden, I could run tests in the middle of the day. I could run them at night. I could run. So this whole idea of experimentation, and the only reason we were able to do that is because we could
Yeah,
visualize and we could see the steps and how they interrelated. And I love how this all fits together, right?
yeah.
And this should really empower business analysts and process engineers on how to really do this right, instead of, I'm just going to copy exactly what we've always done in the same order we've always done. That's not the real benefit, from my
Absolutely
perspective.
right. Absolutely right. You literally couldn't have said that any better. I think that the the thing that I really like about this approach, and I'm not saying it's the best approach in the world. I know that there are software engineers just as good or better than me who take a completely different approach, and I'm sure they're very.
They're just not as enlightened as we are, Max.
But I'm sure that there's valid counter arguments. But what I really like about this is that it feeds the business. And here's what I mean by that. There is fidelity between the diagram and the actual execution. A lot of times in the business that you and I are in, we'll draw the diagrams and that'll be the starting point. But
And then from there
it
on, it's
evolves,
gone.
right?
Yeah.
The developers
Yeah.
make a compromise, they do something or another, and it doesn't reflect back. So what the business thinks is happening and what IT is really
Isn't
doing,
what's happening.
they've separated. Where with this, the picture is the code. It is always an accurate representation of what you're really doing. And the business can come and look at you and go, no, dummy, you're doing it wrong. Do step 2 before you do step 1. It'll save you a lot of trouble.
Right.
You know, we had a system where we were checking to see what country somebody was in, and then based on that, we were looking at what rewards they were entitled to, and then giving them discounts. We did this for a long time. We modeled it because the tool I was showing you has a rule engine embedded into it. And then one day we showed it to the business, and they're like, "Well, that's stupid. 90% of our business is in the United States. Why don't you check for that first? Why is it down at the bottom after all these other countries?"
At the bottom, yeah.
Right? Drastic improvement. Because
so I love that the model, it's not a diagram.
Right.
That's what we want to get across. It's a model, and it drives the simulation. It drives the application itself. It represents. So I love how that's all tied together. Max, this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
We could talk for hours. I already know that.
Absolutely.
But hey, our listeners will get tired. So Max, thank you so much for coming on the show. We most definitely will set up some time again.
I really enjoyed this, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and do something wonderful.